Hello and welcome to this. Well, I guess this talk with that I want to have like with Crispy from the channel Tablerunner. I put the link to his channel down below, and I wanted to talk about to Crispy today because Crispy has been on I could say you could say like a journey to realign his GMing style because he felt like he wasn't getting as much as the OB as he should, or as he used to, or as he could. And I thought it was a very interesting way, a very interesting uh, talk that we're gonna have about that because so many of us have been doing the same thing for so long, and seeing somebody that can actually like look back and have the humility to say, you know what, maybe I could do better. I think this is something we always like have those channel. We talk about the game because we want to help people get more from the game, and now we have actually somebody that is documenting his experiment and his attempt to get more from the game. So thank you, Crispy, for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for the invite. Looking forward to it.
Is that intro that I gave you fair?
It was way too generous, Max. You're being way too kind. But yeah, no, that's fair. It's my attempts at experimenting, at trying to get more out of the hobby, get more of my time in the hobby, and then at the same time have my players get more as well. So yeah, I think that's a fair characteristic or characterization of what I'm trying to do. Now, whether or not I'm successful in that, well, time will tell. But I think it's accurate that you had said experiment with, and that is very much what I'm attempting to do here.
Yeah, but I think like I said, like oftentimes, like what I like about what you bring in the channel when on your channel there is like you are very humble, and you come and you say like, well, this didn't work, I tried that, and you don't try to bullshit people, like trying to say, oh, I'm the best GM, I've been doing that forever. You come here like all like with all like the the mistake you make, and then you allow other people to learn from it. So I think it's a very refreshing approach from where like there's a lot of talking head on YouTube, and myself included, and we always say like, oh, you should do that, you should do this. And of course, there's always like, well, that's our opinion,
Mm-hmm.
When I say you should do this, you say like, you should try this, and maybe you help you get more from the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Try it, and if you don't like it, you can always go back. It's
yeah,
not
of
like
course.
you don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I think that your comment is right on, Max. There's no shortage of people that will hold themselves up as experts.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really hold myself up as an expert. It's more of someone that has been in the hobby for many years, that's willing to try new things and see how they work. And then try to be authentic about it. Like, that's not just I'm creating a new list, and if you do this, you'll do great. But don't ask me to demonstrate that or actually tell you how it worked when I tried to do that. Like, it's I think authenticity is very much needed. So yeah, that's
it
what
does
I'm
come true when we watch your video. It's very appreciated. So what were you doing before? What weren't you getting? Yeah, go ahead.
So it's just kind of the standard what I was doing before. So I've always been one to look at, or I guess question a little bit why we're doing things. So I've just always tinkering, I guess. I guess you can call me a bit of a tinkerer when it comes to the game. We'll try something, and then we'll see how that goes, and then we'll try something else. And I came to this point where I started to ask myself, I think, questions that most of us in the hobby should ask ourselves. What is it that you really like? So just ask yourself, like, what is like, for example, Max, if I were to put you in the spotlight and say, Max, tell me why Pendragon. Tell me why, or even more specific than that. Describe to me your favorite session in the last year. And just said, well, what was it about that session, that game experience, that made it stand up head and shoulders above what other sessions were? And I think asking those kind of questions opens up a whole realm of possibilities of, well, how can we get more of that? Like, that's what I want. I want the gamer crack that we take on a monthly or weekly or whatever we can to get our fix for gaming. Why is it that it's so engaging? Why is it? That's what I guess that's what I'm looking for, is looking for those things that make this different as a hobby than just having a having a video game session. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with a board game. You mentioned in one of your streams that you enjoy board games. So do I. They're great. But if I had a choice between a board game and a role-playing game, I'm going to pick a role-playing game every time. Why? What is it that makes it so different?
Yeah, I think you're really touching on something there, because like role-playing game in the hobby itself, they do bring something that no other hobby can reach. I believe, that's why I'm so interested in it. And what it got is is the freedom, the creativity. There's a lot of things that you won't find something else. The fact that you can immerse yourself in the game and you're just there creating the story together.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you won't get from video game. In video game, you're always going to be on some kind of rail.
Exactly.
It's something you won't get from a board game, because in the board game, again, you play the games. There's the rules. They're like, now it's just like it's your chance to get a taste of a different life, of being someone different, that thinks differently than you. Like, get out of yourself a bit. It's a vacation from yourself, in a way.
Exactly. And so and I agree, those are the same kind of things that I find so engaging about the hobby, so much what I like so much about role-playing games. So then the question becomes, okay, so what can I do to get more of that? If I want to emphasize that, because that I do think you're right. It's the cooperative, immersive experience of simulating a world, a fantasy world, or whatever world you choose, and setting is super important. I think, like, it's just really important to have good settings that engage you as the game master, but also the players, that everyone's really excited about that, and then just get more of it. So that's the gist of most of my experiments are really how can this enhance that key characteristic. I guess it would be similar to say, like, if you were big into a board game, well, you would probably spend the time, you go on the forums, you read up on the strategies, you maybe even 3D print some different assets for the board game because you're really into it. Well, that's how I am with role-playing games. I suspect most of your audience and my audience feels the same way. Like, we're willing to put in the effort to try to make it better, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously, like, different people are gonna have like different question of like what is better. Like,
of course,
I like to listen to people like I like Victor Gotchev and the Basic Expert, and like watching that show and that show one.
Yeah.
But when I listen to them talk, it feels like we have a different experience with the hobby.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that one is necessarily better. Like, one is going to be better for some people depending on what you're looking for. Not to do like the cop-out answer. And also it can change throughout your life.
It sure can. Absolutely, it can. I don't actually think that's a cop-out answer at all. I think it's just an answer. Everyone will have their own answer to why they love role-playing games. Like, what is it? And I have my own answers for it. I'm sure you do too. And we probably align more or less in most cases. And others will have different things. They just love the tactical nature of it, the chainmail-esque types, and that's great too. And if I was in that camp, then my channel would be more geared about, well, how can I get more of that? So do I do 3D terrain? Do I do, like, what is it about that I like so much that I want to do more of? For me, it's really more of a shift towards the more imagination. Engaging the player's imagination more, using my imagination more, and then also, and you've mentioned this before many times, letting up a little bit on the reins as the game master and letting the players take the, not only be the spotlights in the emergent story, but also have more input on the setting and the world itself. Like, it's as they navigate through the world simulation. So yeah, that's.
That's something I often say. Like, and people in my audience will hear me say that all the time. But like, the players at the table are not there to be your audience.
No,
they're co-creator of
very much so. Yeah,
they control the protagonist, And the story that we actually like unfolding through play is the story of those protagonists. So they play a big part, like the GM, you kind of have to react and to let the player lead in a lot of way. I think that's I think
it
but
can be nerve wracking, can't it? Like
yeah,
because you think, well, what are these guys going to do? Are they going to take advantage of this additional degrees of freedom that I'm encouraging them to take? Like, what is that going to be? But most of those, what I've found is that most of those concerns, they just come back to me trying to exercise more control than I really should in my style of gaming, right?
Yeah, I think letting go of this control as a GM, it is nerve wracking, but in the end, it will get you like much more because like you're not there just to provide and feel like, and you won't have like as much like passive player. When you learn to do that, and if your player get the buy-in or on with this, then it's gonna be like instead of like you telling a story, it's gonna be a dialogue. It's gonna be like it's gonna go both way. So it's a better experience, I think, for everybody involved because everybody get to be the storyteller and discovering the story together.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than just running through some contrived plot devices that I've come up with, and I can understand why it's because I've done that too. I've done the whole hook, line, sinker all the way through. But what I'm doing now, instead of doing a hook, line, sinker type adventure, I'll have a hook, but I won't. The other parts of it will develop over the course of the game session. I won't come into it with the sinker already decided. So yeah, he's referencing a particularly egregious example of what I would not consider to be a good game. Forcing, railroading players, moving players instead of letting them move themselves. That's I used to be guilty of that, absolutely. And as part of this this journey to enhance the components of the game and the hobby that I enjoy so much, I've been moving away from that as much as I can. Not perfect, but I think I'm getting better at it. And what's the way I measure this is probably the way that most of you watching measure it. Are you getting excellent feedback from your players? Like, are the players coming away from this saying, I enjoyed this session more than I've enjoyed other sessions? Well, why? Why did you enjoy this more? What was it specifically about this that you liked? And one thing that I think we could maybe talk about is how reinvigorating it is to invite people fresh to the hobby. Like I really love taking people that have never gamed as a role-playing game and then introducing them, because they come at it with fresh eyes. And it just is it's a great, it's fun to do, to have someone come in. And I introduced someone that's like 60 plus years old, has never played anything like this before. And he's been a great addition to the group because he comes at it having no preconceived notions of what this is supposed to be, right? And that's really good for those of us that sometimes need a little bit of a shot in the arm to get excited about it again. Introducing someone fresh to the hobby will do that for you. It's really, really good.
Yeah, but it's I find like it's sometimes a little harder to do nowadays.
It is
because of the video game kind of generation. People have played like RPG in video games, and now they come with assumption. And in video game, because you always have those choice to make, it's just like you pick a choice in a list of predefined list. They come to the table with those kind of expectation. So sometimes somebody that is not a gamer, somebody that is older, or somebody that is open to the experience, and you can tell them like, this is not like a video game. You don't wait for me to give you option to pick from. Like, it's not like, like Dice Tale said, like we all started thinking the GM is the book when you have a choose your own adventure book. Tell your player like, this is not a choose your own adventure. You don't have like a few choice to pick from. You think about the world, what is described, you fill in the blank. I give you the details that are important. You're free to fill in the blank and interact with the world. children can be good as that in a sense sometimes because they don't have like all the inhibition. Their creativity
True.
can go a little more freely, but sometimes it can be a little harder to rein them in.
Yes.
And they might have a hard part on the empathy side also.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I haven't gamed too much with kids. I had an experience several years ago now. Wow, it's got to be, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Many years ago, I had an experience where I was running a game in a small town for some high school kids that really wanted. I was a teacher at the time, and they really wanted to experience what this D&D thing was. And unfortunately, there was one player that I thought he had gotten clearance from his parents. He told me he did. Evidently, they kind of felt like this was a semi-satanic ritual or something, and so they came at me hard. And it was a small town, and after that, I just kind of said, it was a good experience for these kids. They had a great time. I hopefully introduced them to the hobby in such a way that they'll want to continue, but it's just not going to work for me in a small town. I'm not going to have, I mean, they were gathering their forks and pitchforks and torches. And I was like, this is probably not good. So I had to call it quits on that. Since then, I have been very reluctant to run games for anyone that's not age of majority. It's not that I'm running things that are like this isn't. I don't typically run. I run mature games, but not in the sense of we're pushing the limits. Yeah. It's just the themes could be more mature, and I wouldn't have done that for the kids, of course, but it just it kind of scared me off that having young people in the game. It's just, and it's a shame because I agree with you. Young people will have an excess amount of imagination, which will be great. Maybe at sometimes too much, but I'd rather have too much imagination than have a dearth of imagination. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather have more of that than not enough, where everyone's just sitting around staring at numbers on a piece of paper and saying, well, what does this even mean? Like, what are we doing? Like kind of like like Dice Tales was saying, we'll just go to the zoo. I guess it's 5 credits. We'll just go to the zoo.
Just probing around for the option, looking for the right solution, and thinking that the GM come as a solution as well. Like then that's also something I often say. When a GM, you're there to present problems and challenge the player, but it's the player job to come up with solution.
Yes,
you don't necessarily know.
Yeah.
And I think like if you. That's a mistake I often see like GM do as well. They want to prove how smart they are, so they make this puzzle and this is a solution, or the player will never find it. And I think that's or they want to present like this moral quandary, but in their mind there's clearly like a right side. I think if you're doing that, you're cheating yourself from a meaningful experience. Like present the moral quandary that you don't know. You don't know exactly. Like you can see both sides. Even as a GM, you say like, well, there's those two factions fighting, and those are the problems and stuff like that. You can present that in your world.
Yeah.
Don't make it obvious, because like part of the game and part of what you're gonna get from is like the player together discuss that like in character, and like you weigh the pros and the cons of every side, and you're gonna see the different character react differently to different like idea.
Yeah. Well, and there has to be, you have to leave enough space for the characters to react differently. And my problem with that, because I've heard that advice time and time again. Okay, and from all the normal sources, whenever you design an encounter, first of all, I mean, we could have a whole conversation about encounter design and that whole concept. I think we could probably question some of that. But at any rate, most of the time you've heard, I'm sure, that players should always have more than one way of solving an encounter. But then if I'm already deciding in advance what those ways are, then it just becomes a guessing game.
Exactly.
So like we're just trying to guess what I had already decided. I'd rather have something created spontaneously from the character side that I could not have anticipated, hopefully. And I like those surprises. I think those surprises are good. And as it pertains to the moral, I love having having players faced with decisions that have consequences one way or the other, especially if they're moral consequences. But as you say, if I already have decided what the right choice is, then I'm no longer presenting a world that the players can interact in. I'm just moralizing to the players. I've turned it into a practice of proselyting, because I want them to choose one thing, right? So yeah, I don't like that.
That's also something like you're giving a lecture to your player. You're trying to teach them something, or to prove or you say like, oh, I'm gonna have like this. You go back to the multiple choice question. Like, oh, there's I made this encounter, and like there's 4 or 5 possible way you can solve it, and then it's just like, no, there's this encounter happening, and also, and you're not trying to prove how clever you are to your player.
No.
And it also cuts on your prep time, because you say, you know what? Now, like, there's this conflict in the world, and that the player is going to interact with it. Let's see where it goes.
Exactly.
True play, exactly. I don't have to be sitting there before the session thinking about, oh, if the player do X, this is Y is going to happen.
Oh,
but if they
totally.
do, no, exactly. You don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that, because it'll take it. I've found because I have done that. I'm guilty of that for many, many years. That's what I would do. What if they do this? What if they do that? There's just too many possibilities to cover. And like most of us have experienced, whatever your session plan was, it will not survive contact with your players. Like within the first few minutes, unless you're running a game where the players have zero agency, they're going to do something hopefully different. And that's part of the fun. At least that was one of the things that I identified when I asked myself the question, what is so engaging about this hobby? What do I like so much about it? And I realized, well, one of the reasons why I like this game so much, or just the hobby in general, is because I enjoy seeing the unpredictable unfold. I like the idea that something that I didn't plan will happen. And my players seem to have the same response. So I want to encourage that, rather than just have guessing games. Is it, behind this solution or that solution or this other solution? Let's see what the players come up with, especially if players can engage as their characters. Like, so it's not just them, because that's the other thing that can be a problem. Very much like what you said, this is not, being a game master is not an exercise of beating over the heads of your player just how smart you are. If that was the case, it would be one of the shortest beatings that I could ever administer. And there's just no way that I'll be able to continue that week over week. They'll eventually see the patterns, right? Yes, and that's one of the advantages of some of the products out there that use charts or random tables. And I've used that too to try to break my own habits. And random tables are good. And I do like random tables, especially when I'm trying to come up with the initial obstacle, because maybe it'll be something that I wouldn't come up with. But where was I going with that? So it just is important to not have that be, this is me trying to show myself as some kind of brilliant strategist or a wannabe writer or something like that. It's just not going to work. It's not sustainable over time. I think that the solutions that a group of people can come up with as they play their characters will always be on a different level than just what one person will be. That's one of the struggles I had back in the 4th edition days of D&D, which is very much I know it gets a lot of hate, and I sold all my books when it was done. I wasn't going to keep them. But one of the things that it did show me is that as far as a miniature combat game goes, the game master is always going to be at a bit of a disadvantage, because my tactics, as good as I may be, unless I'm grandmaster level war gamer, the players are going to outsmart me at some point. So it's not, and it does create a little bit more of an antagonistic relationship between the game master and the player, which I don't think has, unless you really like that sort of thing, that's not something that I was looking to enhance. I don't think that in my experience is not something that I get the most enjoyment out of.
No, I agree. I think like role-playing games should be a cooperative experience first.
It is, yeah.
And because the goal is not to beat the GM, the goal is to explore this world, create this narrative, figure out what the story of those characters is, true play. RPG grammar was saying like create the problem, let the player solve the problem how they want.
Exactly.
That's something that we discussed about. Like that's right on the money right there.
I think you're right. Absolutely. And I love your channel, by the way, ma'am. I really like it. So thank you for commenting.
I wanted to talk about like Charlotte here say like just focus on building up the world. Eventually, it won't matter if they zig when you want them to zag. And I want to link to that. Like I comment that Dice Tale, formerly known as Crap Phone, say it's about experiencing a world I will never be able to visit. For that reason, I want it to be as immersive as possible. And I want to talk about that a bit, like because that's something you mentioned as well. Like, exploring this world, being immersed in this world, and our setting is important. Like discovering the setting, and I want to talk about it a bit because like I'm the guy that I often say like I like settings that are more mundane, that are more toned down, because then it takes away the distraction of making the setting the star of the show instead of the character. And it's something like I know like some people say, oh, I want to explore a different place, I want to see a different world. But for me, what I want, the immersion I'm after, I want you to be immersed in the world, but even more so than that, I want you to be immersed in your character.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why, like I said, like a more mundane setting. Oftentimes, and I know now you're playing like Weird Frontier, which is like
we have been playing Weird Frontiers. That's right.
Yeah.
And the feedback from the players on that on playing a Western is that, like you were saying, with the advantage of a more mundane setting, is that the setting doesn't overshadow the characters themselves. Like the players can envision the character within the setting. But without having the setting be a distraction. And running a Western was very much like that. The players were able to, via their imagination, make a bunch of assumptions about the setting, and then just have those assumptions be in the background.
Yeah,
and so I think it does work that way.
Yeah, I think a setting that allows your player to make assumption that the assumption is going to be correct. It takes out a lot of it prevent like it avoid the player having to always ask question about the setting, because you know what, it's like X but Y, and also in a setting like Weird Frontier, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a fairly mundane Western setting with some kind of Lovecraftian element.
That's a fair. It's very similar to Deadlands in that it's for the most part a mundane world, but with a fantastical element layered on top. So, but in true DCC fashion, with huge swings on how magic works. So it can work all sorts of different. It's very unpredictable. There is magic, of course. There's monsters. There's casting and all of that. But that is, and I suppose, as I say that, because I agree with what you're saying. If you can just if the players can just make the assumption, oh, it's just like this, then they don't have to ask a bunch of questions constantly. Well, how does Law and Order work? Well, if you've seen a Clint Eastwood Western movie, this is how Law and Order works. Like this, it's going to be like this.
Crafty, excuse me, I have to. You can keep talking. I'm going to hear you, but I have to step up.
Oh, of course. So I was going to say that. Well, what was I going to say? Well, I would just argue that the best thing that I found when it comes to the setting not being not overshadowing or drowning out the character is I like to start really small. So instead of giving a huge info dump over the entire world as a Weird Frontiers concept, no, it's one dusty Western town. That's it. And we don't have to go into all of the various things because the players haven't experienced that yet. They've just experienced one dusty Western town. And I think that could be helpful, especially if the setting is something that's going to be a little more far-fetched or fantastical, as long as it starts small and then the players can experience those the differences as they move their characters through the world, then that's a little better than trying to just hold in your mind all of the ways that Eberron is different from the world we live in. Like that's very difficult to do. I'm not convinced I could do that, even with the setting book open in front of me. Like some of these setting books that I'm sure everyone's familiar with, they're 200 plus pages. So are you just going to have that open so that you can reference? Well, how does this work? Like, so, what is the impact of, taxation in this setting? Do we have to, is there a chapter on that? I'd rather have that be something that is just discovered organically. Now I understand that there's going to have to be some kind of baseline somewhere so that you can get things started. But my thoughts on this is, one of the advantages of a mundane thing too is you can just keep it very tight to the characters rather than be immediately into global intrigues and politics and all this other stuff. It could just be very, very local, and then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it, because like also like if you have like those setting book with a lot of pre-established lore, like I say, if you want to do something that like based on a movie or something like that that your players are very familiar with, like there's a lot of like a Star Trek nerds out there.
yeah, true. Yeah,
that's gonna know every detail about like Star Trek.
Yes.
If you want to play like in that kind of world, then like the heavy lifting is done already.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
but
there's already a shared understanding of what the lore is.
Yeah.
What the challenge would be, I would imagine, in a situation like that, like let's say you and I and the rest of the players know the world of The Expanse, the novels or what have you, or maybe you watch the show on whatever streaming service it is, and we know it already. So we all know, but now we're going to bring in a new person that's never seen the show. So how is that going to work? Like, so I think that it's I think it is something where either every player has to be willing to read the 200-page setting book so that you know what to expect, or you simplify it down to just what they would absolutely need to know or that they've lived through in their life so far. Maybe that's kind of a session 0 thing, but I agree. The more complex the setting is, I'd rather go, I guess the other way of looking at this would be, what are your favorite settings and why? So ask yourself the question, well, why is it that I like whatever setting it is, Weird Frontiers? Why do I like Weird Frontiers so much? Well, because it makes me think of the spaghetti westerns that are a lot of fun, and I like that. Okay, so we already have something that I can focus in on. If you're the kind of person that just loves Lankmar or whatever it may be, then identifying the reasons why and then going deep on those reasons rather than having a superficial but wide, broad but shallow. I'd rather go narrow and deep. So it's this one thing. Like there was I think it was a stream I was watching. It was probably one of your streams, Max, when you were talking about how with Tyler about what would be the impacts of resurrection.
Yeah,
resurrection magic. Like that would change everything. Like that one spell would just make everything different. Or cleric spells of create water.
Yep.
If you could just create water, why are there droughts? What is the long term what's the long term ramification of something like that? And I would rather go deep on that than have it just be a hand wave that this is, well, it's just it's just a high fantasy setting, so everything goes. Well, it's going to change everything though. Like that, even that one element. So I would prefer settings like that where this one thing has changed, and because this one thing has changed, the world is a completely different place. But it is something that I think players can get their head around. If you say this is like modern day New York, except for this thing, and now everything is different, but it's all related back to this one thing. I tried to do a one shot where I was using the thought that what would happen if tomorrow we had instantaneous transportation? What would be the ramifications of that? Like if you had call them whatever you want, runcible gates or jump gates or some kind of teleportation, instantaneous teleportation. How would that make sense if that were to happen tomorrow? What would the setting look like? And all the things that would change because of that one change. And I'd rather have settings like that. So call it a little more mundane with the sprinkling of the fantastical, but just enough to make it unrecognizable from our world, but close enough that it doesn't require a huge amount of heavy lifting to understand, or like you had intimated before, Max, a endless stream of questions.
Yep.
Like, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or do they have cell phones here? Or do they have this? Or what do we do for that? Or how do we, if we can hand wave some of that away, then we can focus in on where we should be focused, which is the heroes of the story.
Yeah.
Like
the more you play with, the more you fiddle with the different like dial, and like you try to change stuff to your world and add original. The more you open up opportunity for the players to break the world in a way.
Oh, absolutely, and they will.
They're gonna come up with
they'll
something
gleefully vandalize it and break it. So absolutely, with
because,
no
like you say, like,
no restraint, they will break it.
It's important to ask yourself why, and to think of the implication of this thing you added to the world.
Yeah,
because if you don't, your players will, if they're engaged. And then if you don't have a good answer for it, or if what the plan they come up based on the logic of the world that you presented, if it breaks the world, or if you say, no, that wouldn't work, now you're just gonna fucking break their immersion.
Well, it will. The whole simulation will come tumbling down. They say, okay, so obviously this just doesn't make sense. Like Dice Tale says, things have to make sense in the context that they're presented. And that can be a fantasy thing. Like that could be a Lord of the Rings-esque type game, but it has to be internally consistent. And that requires it does certainly require that all parties agree to keep it consistent. Within, use your imagination, of course, but we're not all of a sudden introducing AK-47s into a Lord of the Rings style game. Like, oh, well, yeah, but I'm an artificer. I can just create that. Oh, okay. So you're creating a lot more than what would be believable in the setting.
That would be like a multiple lifetime of tinkering, and it wouldn't just like come up from the.
It wouldn't just like magically appear. So there'd be metallurgy involved. There'd be chemistry involved. There's going to be all of the metalworking. So all of that, and then on top of that, there's going to be all of the trials and errors, and then what else does it imply? Like as soon as you change that, then the other things change. So Justin made a good comment there. The world changes with the smallest revolution in technology in radical ways, and that is very much true. The best fiction is when the changes to technology are singular and direct. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I think that's
we learned from. That's something we learned from the Unabomber Manifesto as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
every technological change bring about social change.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when the manifesto starts making more and more sense to us. We're like, yeah. So yeah,
well, it was right on
that's true. Yeah.
There was like a Dice Tale was saying this comment earlier, like in the way Dracula movie works, slowly but surely you move from the normal mundane into the fantastic. You boil a frog, and that's also what you were saying about those westerns town, and because it helps align the player knowledge with the character knowledge.
Yes.
Like if you keep your world, like, and also it keep the fantastical fantastic, because you first, and that's also like part of the Campbellian, like, story, like the monomyth that people call it. You start from the mundane world and then you go into the fantastical world.
Yes.
You don't want to start in the fantastical world, because then
I completely agree, Max. I completely agree, because I would hate to lose the sense of wonder. And the sense of wonder is in discovering something that's discovering something new, and you want to. I think. Well, I want to retain that at all times, because then that's something that the players there becomes this motivation from the players' perspective of, well, what else can I discover here? There's something new to see, and there's something wonderful or wondrous that will, and in many cases now, I'm inviting the players to take part in that invention. So I want your imagination engaged to create the wondrous in the world, not just me, and not limiting it to one person's imagination, but having 5 people imagine this thing together, and that's a lot of fun.
Arman, bring a different perspective here, I guess, a bit of a different perspective, and I'd like to see how you would reply to that. Open world is best when player and GM coordinate what the session will be about. Turning left to surprise the GM is not desired in our game. What do you want to do next session? I will prepare.
Yeah, speaking to that very thing, what I've started, because we were for a while, and I've talked about this in a few of my videos, about how I like to run episodic games. Like, so it's the same characters week over week, but it's different episodes. And what I was doing, Arnman, was I was asking the players, okay, what type of session would you like to try? And they would say, we want a murder mystery, or let's try a murder mystery. So they come into the session with and the other thing too, I think that it's not, I would take exception to players that are just trying to stick it to me by, okay, well, and I try to avoid that, the whole thing of, well, obviously the game master wants an encounter here, otherwise he wouldn't have drawn a map. So I take the map element out of it, so that there's no longer this, because if I spent half an hour with my crayons drawing a nice color-coded map, and then the players say, well, screw that, I'm not going to go anywhere near that place, then that is very much the players just trying to stick it to me. Yeah. And maybe at a certain element, I'm trying to stick it to them. No, you have to go here. I've tried to move away from that. But speaking to this idea that it's good to coordinate sessions, I 100% agree with that. So I sit down with the players and say, like, at the end of a game session, I'll ask them, is there something in particular we haven't done that you'd like to try? And I get answers. I get feedback on that. So I'll talk about how, for example, one of them said, hey, I think it'd be great to do the trope of a Western train battle. Like, on the train, we want to have a repel borders. We want to have a fight on the train and trying to keep people off the train, and then train, all of that. We wanted to do something on the train. Okay, great. So that creates some parameters that I can at least get these starting components of the adventure ready, and then whatever happens. We create that together. But I completely agree that open world is best when there is a degree of coordination between the game master and the players. 100% agree. Yeah,
that's interesting, because you almost like took it to especially when you say, like, oh, as the player, what do you want to experience? Like, you're asking, in a sense, the player. Like, it's almost like, what do you want to, what kind of like a game you want to have? That's an interesting. That's an interesting take. Because I often say, like, I'm a big advocate of, like, prep less. Try to prep less. Like, try to cut down your prep, like that, because every piece that you prep is a temptation to railroad your player. Like you said, like, oh, I made the map, I'm gonna force the player to go to that map. I spend time in that, and but I say, like, yes, and as much as the campaign goes on, usually you'll be able to reduce your prep time even more so.
Yes.
Because you get to know you get to know your player, but you also get to know the character, and the character have goals and motivation, and you can kind of expect what they're gonna do to some extent. And if the world makes sense, and if the world, like, designed itself, and the player will want to interact with the world, I think those players that say, like, oh, I'm gonna turn left just to surprise the GM, this is almost like this is like out of character kind of action.
It is. That's almost it's almost a metagame type thing. Yeah,
and you become a disruptive player when you do that. So if you can avoid those type of players that are just trying, like you say, to stick it to the GM, or just like try, oh, I'm gonna keep him on his toe. No, just do what your character would do. And if you're consistent in the way that you depict your character and you play your character, I'll know where you go, where you're likely to go. I'll know what you want to do. I say, like, don't do too much prep, but I do think about the world as well.
And I think that
when I do the dishes, stuff like that, I'm gonna think about the game.
Well, I think that is the most valuable prep. The most valuable prep is just thinking about, okay, well, how did the actions from last session influence the world? What would be the believable response from the world? And then I think that's good. I am not a zero prep game master. I wish I were. I'm still working on improving my own improvisation and imagination techniques. And I'm hopeful. I have no evidence that this is the case, but I'm hopeful that, like any skill, imagination is something that you can just work on and become better at. I'm hoping to do that. So I'm reading lots. I'm reading. I'm trying to read different genres than I normally do, expand the horizons, working on the imagination. But the prep of that you mentioned, which is just thinking about the game, but especially thinking about the goals of the characters, thinking about what the characters have had. One thing that I've done this in the past, and I'm doing it more now, is I'll think about each player. Yeah, there you go. So I'm hoping imagination is a muscle, which means we can train it. Yeah, or we can just do mushrooms. Like there's that too. So I guess, there's either we're training the muscle or taking a psychedelic. But I'm gonna try just training the muscle first. So thanks, Justin. That's a very helpful recommendation. Justin's he's a funny guy. I was going to say that what was I going to say? Justin, you've derailed me. But I do think that it's important to think about those things and thinking about those character. I remember what it was. Before the session, I'll write on a little index card. I'll write a question for the player about his character. And that question will be something related to what happened in the last session. So this happened to you in the last session. What does that mean for your character? Like the character is going to react to that. I don't like the idea that every session that we have, the characters have just started with a blank slate. They have all of that baggage, so to speak, all of that life experience that they've in the simulated world. And I want that to come to the forefront. So I'll have these little cards, and they'll have the name of the character on the back of the card, and just a question. And this is a rhetorical question. This is not something that I expect the players to answer to me or to each other. I just want them thinking about how their character is changing over time. And I think that's as valuable prep as thinking about some location that would be interesting to interact with. I think that's important too, but I'm more interested in the character development. It should be, in my experience, one of the things I like most about role-playing games is the character focus. I like the focus on a character-focused game. So, yeah.
Yeah, and character development is such a big part, and character development is not just leveling up. Like leveling up is like it's barely character development. That's like you gain skill and stuff like that. Those are mechanical aspects. It's like all those goals, those motivation, your interest, your fear. Maybe you get like better rivalry with somebody. This is all part of character development, and that's also something I would say to player. Let your character grow.
Yes.
I'm playing in a Castle and Crusade game with Rick from 28mm RPG, and last session.
Rick's great. Yeah, he's a gentleman.
Last session was a very fun one because we did see it was like a more relaxed session. I think there was like one dice roll did. We're in town. We're like trying to tighten up loose ends and stuff like that, trying to figure out what we do next. But in that session, where there was no action per se, there has been a lot of a character development, and that's also something as a GM. That's something you have to recognize. And you say like, you know what? There's no action going on, but it's still a good session because there's a lot of character like interaction. We're still early in the campaign, so we're still discovering where character are. And that's also as a player, you might come to the table with an idea what your character are, but you're really gonna discover it through play as well. The same thing that the world is discovered through play.
Yes,
you discover your character through play as well. So it goes both ways. We need
it
to
goes
be
both
open,
ways,
and we need to be flexible.
We need to be flexible, and I think that's one of the, and we're kind of touching a little bit, maybe tangentially, on the backstory issue for characters. Yes, you should have some motivations when you start, but your story will it'll unfold. It'll reveal itself as you experience things in the game. So you have maybe a brief where you came from, why you're here. But really, like you said, the fun for me as a player is discovering more about the character as I play it. Well, how would this? And eventually, squeezing the space between me and the character, so that I'm just thinking as the character. I'm no longer putting.
Exactly.
I'm not thinking of me, thinking me. So Crispy, how would Crispy run this character? No, I'm just running the character as the character. I know that might sound a little semantic, but it is. I do think there's a difference. It's the difference perhaps between third person and first person. I'm aiming for first person kind of immersion rather than me controlling someone like a video game in a third person thing. I'd rather be more on the first person side.
And that's something I often say. Like for me, the essence of role play is when you can hijack your own thought process with the thought process of your character. And when there's an alignment between your emotional state as a player and the emotional state of the character, and it's not going to be like as intense, but if your character gets mad, you feel mad. You know, I want you to feel like your character feel. Like I think the emotion is a big part of it, and yeah, you just don't like often liken it. I speak many language, and I often liken it to thinking when you new to a language, you think in translation. You're
Yes,
gonna
that's
think
right.
like when I was now, like when I speak in English, I don't think in French and then translate in English and speak in English. I just think in English.
You just think
And
in
I think
English.
it's the
code
same thing when
switching.
you
The term that we used, because like you, I do speak more than one language. I speak English and French. So in French, one of the things that you could, when you're teaching someone French, for example, you want to have them have that moment where they start dreaming in the language that they're learning, because at that point the code switching has happened so that they're no longer translating. Because when you dream in that language, that means that you're no longer kind of just switching. Well, I'll just do a on the run translation, and that I think that's a very I think it's an apt comparison to what one of the advantages of role playing over other types of hobbies is that you are switching your thinking completely.
And for people that don't speak multiple languages, there's a similar phenomena as well. Like when you're driving a car, when you first start driving a car, and for many of us, like it's been a long time ago, so we forget that. But when we first driving a car, we have to think about like what we need to do to have the car do something. When you've been driving for a while, the car becomes an extension of yourself, and you don't think, okay, I need to turn the steering wheel this way. So I'm just going, I am going this way. But you're driving the car, you're sitting there, you're not moving.
Yeah, absolutely. I love riding motorcycles, and the beauty of a motorcycle, even more than a car, is that you are the top half of the vehicle. So small changes in your body will translate to the asphalt. It's that's one of the things I love about motorcycle riding, is that there's just so much that you, at first, it's a little overwhelming. Your hands are busy, both feet are busy. The way you're holding your body has an impact. But as you get more experienced riding, you get those things become more muscle memory, and then you just get to feel like you're flying.
And on motorcycle as well, you often have to go against your instinct.
Yes, you do.
You go into that curve.
Yeah.
You took the curve a bit fast. You want to speed up the
bike.
No, you have to lean more.
Yes, and that's one of the things that for new riders, it's really hard for them to feel like, okay, no, you actually have more control by leaning the motorcycle. I know you're going to feel like you're going to fall over, but you're not going to fall over. You trust your skills, trust your training. You have to do that. You have to get that feel. Once you get that feel, then it becomes something that just becomes automatic and really enjoyable. Yeah.
I want to talk about like this idea that like imagination is a muscle. Like the muscle of imagination is best flexed with how fast you respond to the element. By the way, that's true as well.
Yeah, it is true. And Justin, I think that may be the best indicator of when imagination is getting to a place where it is being developed well. Because then when something happens just out of left field, it's something that you not only are looking forward to, but you embrace it and say, well, this is a new direction I hadn't anticipated, but let's run with it. Let's go with it. Yeah. Rather than saying, oh man, how do I get them back into this room? And that's not the hallway. Dang it. Okay, we're going to have to just use the quantum ogre thing or the quantum room. And that's, I feel, cheating yourself as the game master out of a better experience.
Yeah, let the contribution of your player stand. At some point, like, especially if it's a detail that doesn't really matter. Like in the game we were watching on Shauner's channel yesterday, like where the GM, like the player tried to do something, and the GM like constantly like, no, actually it worked in that way. You know what? It doesn't matter. The player had an idea.
Doesn't matter.
And now you want to put a wall in front of him, saying like he was trying to do something. He was finally trying to do something. I can say in that case.
Yeah.
And now the GM said, no, actually, it doesn't work or whatever. Like, give us some kind of excuse and say, like, man, now like you can have like a player just like waiting there for them to use a story. You know what I mean?
And along those same lines, like Max is saying, I want to move away from the idea of derailment altogether. to be derailed means that I already had a preconceived notion as to where things were going to go. And if I can move away from those preconceptions and embrace the participation of others, I'll get more out of it. And who cares if I was thinking that, no, actually the doors slide this way, or no, the hinges on the door were on this side, not on that side, and all of those kind of minutia, then it's not great. It's not a great thing to do. It's better to just let it go, let go of the reins a little bit, have other people involved, have the players involved.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and you can you can adapt your mindscape to, like, when the play, like, you depict the scene, you say what's important in the scene, and then the player is going to interact with it. They can fill in the blank and use those fill in the blank that they do and adapt your way to see it as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Max. Why is it that that the players are always expected to adjust to my descriptions? I can't ever adjust to theirs. Like that, I don't think is fair. I think now that's assuming that we have a level of trust with the players, that they're not doing something that is absolutely designed to just break the world, right? So, and again, this may come back to maybe in some groups that you have to have a little tighter rein because players are a little more, they're looking for a different type of experience than what you're looking for. I think that's really important to set the expectations. So that's one of the advantages that I have, and certainly I think you have in your game with Rick, is that there is an understanding between all parties of what it is in general we're looking for. And there's not someone out there that's just doing, yucks, goofiness just for the sake of goofiness. And wow, I can't believe it. Wasn't this great how we just ruined the game master's, whatever the game master had planned for us or whatever. And I think that's an important component too.
I think, like, for some people, like, their way to win at D&D, if you can say that, is by, if they're one that gonna get the most laugh at the table and stuff like that. They're always gonna derail, and they become like very disruptive player. And it's sad to see that, because those players are cheating themselves from a meaningful experience.
They are, they are.
They're just trying to get some attention, and which I can be important, but you can get more than that. And you can get the same attention by being well immersed in your character and contributing to the game in a positive manner.
And that kind of thing.
If you dare,
and it raises an important concept. If your character is that way, then I think that can work just fine. But if it's you as the player doing it, and you're supposed to be, your character isn't that way. I mean, if your character is that way, character is the jokester, he's the clown, he's always goofing off, whatever. But it makes sense because that's your character. Then we can all agree that that's okay, because the humor then should still be properly nested within the fiction of the game, instead of just all of a sudden a bunch of Seinfeld references and we're playing a Castles and Crusades thing. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, I like Family Guy too, but that's you're goofing. You should be goofing off. You're the fool of the group. Okay, but let's try to keep that within the fiction instead of external to it.
Yeah, and this is also like something I wanted to say about, like, the imagination being a muscle. It's something that the more you GM and the more you encounter, like, those, like, sometimes you encounter a new situation and you're gonna react to it, and it's all right. You might not react to it to the best perfect manner you could have.
Sure.
It's okay. The game is still going. Keep the game. Like, I often think about this quote by Patton that he's saying, war, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The second best thing you can do is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing.
Is nothing. Yeah.
It's true in RPG as well. Like, exactly. Like, maybe like the thing that you come up on the fly is not the best solution you could have thought of.
It's okay.
But you keep the game moving. It's okay. And then after the session, you'll think about it. Say, you know what? I should have done that. And then next time when a similar situation come up, you do have the experience. And that's also, like, we say, like, no prep, and it's easy to say, but, like, I've been doing that for a long time. And when I was, like, new to it, I did feel like I did rely on prep a little more. But at some point, like, you've seen so much, you just say, like, you know what? And it's about, again, letting go of that control, not everything is going to be 100% 100% of the time. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong if the player is really, I'm okay. I'm trying my best. I just can't. I'm drawing a blank here. I can't get it. Well, there's mechanics in the game to help with that. There's mechanics in the game. You can just tell me, because you're describing, the key components, where you are in the world and what you're doing in the world. And if you can't, I have a player, for example, and he loathes just the way he is in real life. He's not the kind of guy that is quick on his feet with, witty commentary and that kind of. He's not dumb by any. He just is not that guy. He's not like you and I, which we can, talk on the cuff for an hour and still feel like we haven't really said anything and we need to say more. He's not that way. But I do ask him to, when he's role playing, try to be something different than you. Like just try it out. And he's willing to give it a try. And when we come to those circumstances where there's, he's going to try to sweet talk this guard to do that, the mechanics exist in the game. So It's fine. You can say, I go up, I'm going to make some small talk. He doesn't do small talk in real life. He just doesn't do it. I do small talk in real life. So for me, it's easy. But in the same token, I don't want to punish a player for trying to play a character that is different from themselves. And that's where good game mechanics really shine through. Like, yes, you have a dice roll for that.
Yeah.
Totally fine. Not penalizing you at all. Don't even think it's breaking role playing. It's still, if anything, it's more immersive role playing. So it's good.
Yeah, because you still say, maybe if you don't have the skill in real life, you still said what your character would do. You still say, and then that's all right. You don't need to be like you don't need to be an actual doctor to heal somebody.
You don't. You don't. Exactly. That would be boring. You'd be playing the same character every time. And most of us, real life is a bit of a grind. You really want to take your time out for your hobby to just replay your week? No, I don't want to do that. I want something completely different.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about this. If I don't detail character development with the players, it's their responsibility to fulfill what they want. I present world event and reaction to what they do.
Yep.
It's the player responsibility to develop their own character, obviously. And I like to consider it. I like to notice it as a GM, see where the players go. But also, don't forget that as a GM, you also have characters. Those NPC, like especially like the important mover in the world. They are also character, and you are also gonna discover who they are through play, to the action, and it's true from real life as well. We discover who we are in life by encountering new situations that we've never been presented with.
Yeah, I guess the question I'd have for Arnman is this: what constitutes detailed character development? Like, so when you're saying, I want to understand what your comment is, detailed character development. So what would be too much detail versus just enough so that I hopefully can create some conflicts for this character where they'll feel like they're engaged in the conflict? That I think that would be an interesting to get your take on what is detailed character development than just, okay, what do we need to start? We probably, as a game master, I need something to start with. I don't need to know who your second cousin is 3 times removed. I don't need to know, that one time in elementary school where the teacher berated you. But there has to be some kind of baseline, perhaps. One of the things I like to do with characters is I like to encourage players to think of someone, a friend that they have, or think of a recurring enemy or nemesis. Because I think that it would be maybe an interesting conversation to talk about how my characters acting as a nemesis to the party characters can be something that helps them develop as characters, helps the story develop. And I really like the concept of a nemesis that keeps like this recurring enemy. He's the one pulling the strings in the background. He's got all sorts of other plans that are working in opposition to the players, or even just one player. one character and seeing how that goes. But so I don't disagree, Arnmin, with your approach at all. I think that it makes sense. I would just say what constitutes overly detailed versus sufficiently detailed.
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe some wiggle room there, perhaps.
I like the idea of like a nemesis, but I like those kind of a concept to happen in play. That being said, a character should be like an iceberg. There's this part that you see that is visible to the other character and the player, but like it's good also to have like this big underwater thing that keep the whole thing afloat. You know what I mean? Your character be a little more fleshed out, but that is not something that you need to you need to expose to people.
No, all I ask for in terms of the whatever is on the character sheet, just the only, and I kind of expect this on the character sheet, but what is your short-term goal and what's your long-term goal? And then I expect those things to change. So I'm not going to penalize you if your long-term goal changes because something that happened in the game. Yep. That's just going to happen. But I do think to start off, I like the idea of you have a short-term goal, whatever that is, and then a long-term goal, just so that I know that you're thinking of those things, those motivations for your character. That's about it. That's all I need. The index card thing, that's just me asking them to think about what happened in the previous session and how that's impacting them. That's all.
Yeah. That's what Armand said. Like, I don't need anything to start with except what their character sheets show. The player will present who he is during the first few sessions. No index card need to be filled. I agree with that. I agree with that. I like the. I don't want you. It's almost like the show don't tell. You don't need to tell me who your character is. Show me who your character is. And I adapt. And that's why I often say like the first few sessions might be a little more directed until we get the pace, we get the party together, we see who the characters are. That's fine. You're starting a campaign.
Yeah, but, one thing I tried in this regard, and I actually think this works better than just having someone describe their background, is to do kind of one-on-one introductory adventure with that character. Just because every time I've done that, I've done it a lot, but I've tried it out because someone else suggested it. Said, well, we always do kind of a one-on-one session to introduce the character. In every time I've done that, the character has changed, even in that introduction. So the player says afterwards, I didn't really anticipate him being this way, but as we were kind of riffing on this, the player is now different, and now I'm going to play him slightly different. And that's just even the introductory. And it might only be half an hour to an hour one-on-one with a player with a new character, and it changes. It changes even in just that little bit of time, and that's fine. I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing in role-playing game. What I like to often say is, you will figure out the story of those characters, and we're gonna focus on the interesting part of the story. If the interesting part of your story of the story of this character happen like before the game, out of screen, stuff like that, well, it can be okay in a one shot and stuff like that. But if you're doing the campaign where you say like, what, we're gonna go through the peripety of this character, we're gonna figure out like who this guy is, what happened in his life and stuff like that. You want them to be played. You want those events to happen in play.
Yes.
And also those events that you go through in the game should be to some extent life altering. Why do you spend playtime doing non-life altering, and it can be just in a tiny bit. So the character should change, and that's why I like your idea of like having, I'm gonna ask you something about the last session, or like, I think that's a good idea, because you should have been impacted in some way. The first time you encounter something supernatural, the first time you get beaten, or you have to retreat, the first time, everything, like, it's gonna
a near-death experience or something. Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is not something that I'm asking. I'm not asking them to give me the answer. I just want them to think about it.
Yeah, that's exactly.
All. And so it's not it's not whether or not they think about it. It's up to them. That's up to them. They don't have to if they don't want to. But I'm encouraging them to think. Well, you almost died, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean something to you now? How do you feel about those things now that you almost, or you killed someone? What? Or there was an innocent or whatever that got caught in the crossfire. What does that mean for you? Does that mean anything? How does that change? I try to ask open-ended questions on those little cards, so that hopefully players can just have that a few minutes before we start playing, thinking, yeah, that's right. Maybe that is something that's changed, or maybe not. I'm not trying to put any kind of expectation on it. I just want them to be thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it's on the player part. Like, we often talk about what GM should do, but also like there's a good point also, like what players should do in that sense. If you want to, because it goes both way. Like it's a dialogue. It's
It
in a
is.
way it's
Yeah.
yeah. Dice Tales was saying earlier, like, having said that player can invent things you have to react to, don't surrender so much that you're not driving your world. I agree with that.
Yeah, I
Your
agree.
player feel cheated if they have to make up too much. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's the kind of meaningless element. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter if like the type of heating in the
Yeah.
apartment that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
Just
agree. My comment on that would be that it is still my responsibility to make sure that the world responds. The players don't get to decide the consequence of how the world responds. They help create the world, but I direct the response to character actions. I'm the one that decides how and where the world pushes back. And yes, the world will push back. There's always a action counter reaction.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree. You don't want it to have it such that the players can decide, well, we're just going to change the world such that our actions are seen in a more positive light than they may be. No, I retain that control.
Yeah. Like Armin say, like, we're not doing therapy. We're having a beer and playing a game. It's way more organic. But then again, I'm a very old school, and I think that's often like what we were talking about at the beginning. Like, there's
Yep.
nothing wrong with playing with that.
Nope.
But maybe at some point in your life, you're gonna, and sometimes you just like you're gonna look back and say, I'm having as much fun as I used to playing those games. And would that be fair? Like, that was kind of like the epiphany at some point that you had. Let's say, like, you know what?
Yeah, that's right. Like as we said at the very beginning, I just started asking myself, what do I like so much about this? And then I identified a few things that I really like, and I certainly wouldn't call it therapy, but
No, I wouldn't call it
I
therapy.
identified things that I enjoyed, and then I said, well, what can we do? And just started experimenting. What can we do to get more of those things, to get more enjoyment out of it? And I mean, I would say that there's nothing wrong if you're saying, what, we just want something that's, beer and pretzels, and hey, that's fine. I got nothing against that. You do what you do.
I would even
So
say
it's
that
fine.
that could go both ways as well, because maybe you just like ended up like a big, very immersive, and you're like in character, very emotional, stuff like that campaign. You're just wrap one up, and I say, what, maybe we're just gonna do like a beer and pretzel one, like just
Yeah.
a
I've done that.
palate
Yeah.
cleanser. There's nothing wrong with that
Nothing wrong
either.
with that. In
Yeah.
fact, I recently had an experience like that. So we've been playing Weird Frontiers for a long time now, relatively long. And I asked the players, hey, what do you think about just doing a one shot in a completely different setting? And we'll try it out. And they loved it. And it was a bit of a departure from our kind of long standing, and they found it a little liberating, and I think that was a good experience. So there's nothing wrong with that. If you say, hey, we're just going to have this, we're going to be really lighthearted, it's going to be more comedic, or we're looking for kind of over the top stuff, then great, do it. It could be a bit of a palate cleanser.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always about like you said, thinking about what are you after in that experience, what are you looking for.
Yeah,
I have one way I tend to prefer. You and I agree on a lot, but some people are gonna and it's just a game. It's not like I'm trying to tell you how to change the oil in your car.
No, yeah, it's true. It's true. It's true.
Therapeutic, but not therapy.
Yeah,
I think
I have a very what most people would consider a very high stress employment with my business, and so I absolutely find this escapism a necessary thing for my own sanity. That said, it would be inaccurate to call it therapy because it doesn't really fit the therapy model. It is therapeutic in the sense that it's a way for me to clear my head, to be completely de-stressed, and have just a great time with some friends around the table.
But a lot of things are therapeutic, like hanging out with friends.
Jumping on the motorcycle.
Like any kind of hobby. Yeah, exactly.
That is what I call therapy. When I jump on the motorcycle, I go for a rip around a nice windy road with no traffic and no one in cars with stripes on their legs. If you know what I'm talking about, Mr. Max, no yellow stripe on that leg. Then I'm having a great time, and that I do think is some good therapy.
I know what you mean, like a little bit of space of freedom.
Yeah, which from our neck of the woods is rare indeed. So it's nice to have that. But yeah, so definitely is a nice palate cleanser. I would suspect that most of even those that disagree with my particular approach to or what I like and what I'm working on, I think we can all have some common ground that, hey, it's great to get around with buddies and play a game, like whatever you call the game. That is great. We can all have that as common ground. Like no one's doing this because they hate it, hopefully. Like, and if you are, then maybe this isn't really what you want to do. Like maybe it's something else that you should do.
Don't engage in activity you hate.
Yeah, if you hate it, I mean, it's like, hey, like, I hate tapioca. Like, let's go eat some tapioca. I hate it, but let's eat it. Or that horrendous bubble tea or whatever that is.
But that being said, like, because like there is, I think, still a part of like a psychology that come into play when you play a role-playing game, because you're trying to get into the mindset, you're trying to figure out how this character that is not me would think. And I think that's also like this that's something that's valuable in real life. That's also something I think like a role-playing game bring, like for developing empathy, like thinking about like not projecting your own thought and sentiment onto somebody else, but thinking like this somebody else with this life experience, how would you react to this situation?
So completely. Yeah, you put it better than I could have, and it's in your second language. So congratulations. That's really that's exact. I think you hit it right on the head. Absolutely. Justin has a good comment here. Oh, I skipped over Charlotte's too. If the players come up with something good, try and work it into the setting. Absolutely. One time a player claimed his sister joined a temple to found a colony that healed the party. Later on, it was attacked. Hey, that's excellent. I could work with that. That's awesome. I think that's really good. And Justin makes a good comment too on his. We should highlight his. That's maybe something to talk about. Depending on what type of game you're playing or what type of experience you're looking for, there are some rules that work better than others. And I definitely agree that whatever you're going for, whatever type of game you want, then it makes sense to pick a style or a rule set that's going to enhance the experience that you're looking for. So whatever that may be. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, because now you're playing like we say like World Frontier that is like based on the DCC system. What are you've played some Traveler as well?
I haven't. I've recently purchased the Traveler game. I did a Stars Without Number. I tried that. Really liked the setting in that, and it was fun to do that. It was good. So it was, and and we've done a lot of Savage Worlds in the past. We've played a lot of different things, really, but we're probably going to do another little Savage Worlds things. I do enjoy Savage Worlds. I think it's a good rule set. It has its drawbacks, like all of them do, but it's good. And so I have a fair amount of experience with that. Sorry, that's a long answer to your. I derailed your comment, Max.
No. I was wondering like what type of setting what are the system that you like to engage, but you go like in different direction. Like you don't limit yourself to just a D20 or just like something else.
No. Yeah. I really, and I'm particularly fortunate because I have players that are willing to learn new systems. And I recognize that some of you out there, you may have a group that is absolutely dedicated to one game. And I actually feel, I actually think that's a bit of a drawback, because if you never try anything new, you might actually be missing out on a great game, like a game that actually fits well with what your players are looking for, what you're looking for. So I do like to, I like to pick up games, read them, understand them, I hope, and then run them rules as written first, of course, and get feedback from the players. What did you like about this? And do you want to do it again? Or do you want to go back to what we were doing before?
And I do believe that system does influence the way that you can engage with the game as well. Like
100% it does.
You can have like game with very similar setting, just changing the rules, the system.
Oh, yeah.
the player gonna interact with the world differently.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Like take a look at Rifts. Okay, Rifts is a Palladium. You know, it's their what is that called? It's their flagship. Yeah. So the Palladium system Rifts will play completely different than the Savage Worlds Rifts. It's the same setting, but the rules are different enough that I do think you're going to get a different experience. I have both, and each one has its particular strengths and weaknesses, but it feels different enough that I'm not sure that it's even feels like the same setting. Yeah.
And you see now, like I am writing my own system right now, and one thing I'm trying to do, it's kind of an experiment I'm trying to do. It's a little more crunch system. What I'm trying to do is trying to have the crunch kind of support the role play in a way, in the sense that like the mechanics are like
I really like your skill, what you're doing with your skills. Yeah, I watched your writing stream, and I was really impressed with your skill, the thought that's going into the skill trees, and how if you have ranks or training in some skills in the same category, then there'll be some bleed over into others. I think that kind of crunch, I think, is awesome because it's very believable to me that it does that.
Yeah, that's also something I try to do. I say, like, if your system makes sense, even if it's like a little more complex, it can be easier to learn because you can make assumption again, and it's going to be correct because like it's just logical. So that's one thing I'm trying to do. But it's also like in the fight, like resolving fight in opposed manner, and then like you activate, you basically say like, oh, I'm gonna shift to close range, and then I'm gonna grab the guy, and those are all like mechanic in the game, and I'm gonna bypass his armor with my dagger. Those are all mechanic. You're actually like calling out mechanic in the game, but they're very descriptive. That's what I'm trying to achieve there. So
I would call that describing your actions with normal language rather than a special lexicon of language. Like instead of if I'm understanding you correctly, then, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, if your mechanics are such that a player can describe their actions and you can quickly identify the mechanic being used, then I think the mechanics are working well. If the mechanics have to be specifically mentioned by their game rule or like the rule book name in order for it to work, I think that could maybe be redesigned. So an example of this would be, let's say you're playing a cleric and your cleric has an inspiration type ability. Well, I would like that to be handled in such a way, or my preference would be it'd be handled in such a way that the cleric can just say, I hold up my holy symbol with a prayer and sing a hymn to rally the Knights Templar around me. Like, so I sing a battle hymn, a Crusader battle hymn. Okay, well that and then they roll. Everyone should understand exactly what's going on there without saying that I'm inspiring courage or I'm, do you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather have that be normal, easy language, and then
that's why, like, all the mechanic when I give them name, I try to go with action verb.
Yes.
So if you just say the name of the mechanics straight up, you're still saying something that you're actually doing.
Yes.
You're still like saying an action that your character is doing. So that's why I'm trying to realign those two, so you don't have to.
I think that's a great exercise.
But we'll see. We'll see how well it goes.
So now the impetus for this game that you're writing, and the name is Winter. When it's Winter
Down.
Winter Down, and you're a big fan of the Pendragon. So what is your goal with, if I could be so bold as ask you a developer's question? You're usually the one that's interviewing developers, but I'm going to take that hat on from you, Max. When you usually like Pendragon, that was when, as I understand it, it's your favorite game, and this is different than Pendragon. How is it different, and how is it that this is providing something that Pendragon does not?
Pendragon is not very a crunchy game. And the reason I like Pendragon a lot is because, like I always say, like the fact that you play a human knight, everybody is a human knight. So it takes all the distraction away. So
Mhm.
the character, if you want to play a character and you want your character to be different than the other human knight next to you, then you have to start thinking about his personality and stuff like that. And the world
Right.
in Pendragon is much more mundane. So yeah, it just like it kind of like force people to be into role play mode a bit more. That's why I like Pendragon so much.
Mhm.
What I was trying to do with the Winter Down is bring back a little more freedom. Like now we can move away from this everybody's a player night, but like I kind of pick and choose kind of like the thing that I like from different system. Like it's a life path creation character, which is what I'm working right now. Where so just by saying like you create your character by saying, well, is this race, he was born in this place,
Mhm.
this thing happened when he was a kid, then he took this occupation, then he became an adventurer because of this reason. You have like those kind of like templates, so you come to the table and you kind of know who your character is, and the skill that he got through his life experience. It's a
I got
class-based
it.
system.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and yeah, I wanted to. I saw a lot. I was looking at the like crunchier game,
Mhm.
and I felt like there was like no real evolution. Like
Mhm.
we've seen a lot of like a rule lights game and stuff like that, and they go in different direction, and some of them are great. I like rule lights games as well,
Mhm.
but sometimes I want a little more crunch to sink my teeth in, and
Mhm.
I wouldn't find like something like Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2, but just like more rules, but the rules
Right.
don't necessarily align with
Right.
what I like and what I've tried to do. There are too many, like they bring you too much in the tactical mindset. I wanted to
Yes.
try to, and like that's what I'm saying, it's kind of an experiment I do. I wanted to try to, like I often say, like it's like if I were like do like a thesis in game design, that
Mhm.
would be like my that would be it. If I can like reconciliate
Mhm.
the role playing aspect with the mechanical aspect in a way that
Right.
it both work together instead of working against each other. So
Yes.
that's the question I'm trying to answer.
And it's a really interesting question because it also has an underlying premise that there are mechanics that are more friendly towards a role play focus, and there are mechanics that are against role playing. Like they just don't really work. They work better from a gamist perspective, and if that's what you're looking for, great. Then you've got something that you can use. I'm hoping, because we keep changing systems in my weekly game. I'm hoping to build skills between myself and my players, each of us, that we can work around limitations that may be systematic
Mhm.
and still have a really engaging experience, a lot of fun, and have that character driven, even if in some ways there are mechanics in the system that are not amenable to that style of play. Because I wonder if, and I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder if we get enough experience doing this, if we've exercised that imagination that we were talking about earlier, such that we can think on the fly and think as characters, then maybe we can make these other games work in different ways. But I don't know. That still remains to be seen. I haven't tried enough systems yet to
Yep.
be able to answer that.
I think I like to try new system. I got for me like reading systems almost like a hobby in itself. Like I
Yeah,
got like
yeah, me
interest in
too.
game design and stuff like that. So, and at some point, like you do like I can like people say I would try to draw at first, and I think it's a generally good advice. But at some point,
Yeah,
also you can read a game and say like what, this is gonna cause an issue with that, or like this this won't
yeah,
work so well.
yeah,
Sometimes just like in the wording, so I think at some point you do get a feel for it, like because also like oftentimes the mechanics are reused. It's just like a new system is just like a remash and remixed
yeah,
up with different mechanics from other
yeah,
systems. Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes it's just change for change's sake, and it doesn't really bring much. Like, okay, we're doing something completely different here, but in the end, it's a difference without it's a distinction without a difference. So the
Yep.
end result is the same. Yeah, it's slightly distinct from the others, but it's not. And I agree with you. As you read some rule books, you come across some chapters.
Mhm.
Always the safety chapters. I always skip those because
Yeah.
that's just a waste of print.
Yeah.
But there are some chapters. For example, I was rereading my Savage Worlds core book, I did that over the last day or two, and I came across some of the kind of mass battles type rules. I just don't have any interest in that, so I'm just going to skip over that. So when I come to mass battle rules, it's just not something that I'm, unless the players say, "Hey, we want to play as leaders of the army," and sending out platoons of whatever soldiers, squads of soldiers. Unless they wanted that, I'm just not going to spend any time on it. And there's yeah.
Yeah, that's also something that can come into the prep as well. If you feel like there could be a mass battle coming up in the game, then maybe you go read those rules. You can refresh it up on up. But otherwise, yeah, you can it's not just gonna happen like out of the blue. It's like mass battle. It's like breakout.
Yeah, I should have some warning. Yeah, like all of a sudden. And Charlotte, wait, safety chapters. Yeah, what I'm referring to is the the disclaimer type things like. I don't know. You probably have seen them. Most games now, especially new games, have them. Or don't do this, and you should be that, and ask everyone their preferred pronouns and all of that nonsense. Like I just don't do any of that.
Yeah, or when they be nice to your player, being like, don't fucking tell me how to live my life.
No, exactly.
I'll be an asshole to my player if I want.
Yeah, and I won't have any players then. So that's a problem that solves itself, right? People just leave. But yeah, I do think it's important to read the books. Like absolutely important to read the books and know the rules well.
People were talking a little bit earlier about fun or time fly, and Armen said it's usually the player responsibility to have fun, not the GM discovering what the players want. Players bring the game to life. That's something I agree with. I often say everybody at the table is kind of responsible for their own fun.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And you're also responsible for not ruining the fun of others on the table.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're gonna get what you bring to the table. Like
that's right. That's right. I'm not. I guess I have just who I am. I have a bit of that. You're in my house. I'm here as the host. I have a little bit of that minstrel on display type. So that's something I need to work on, because I do internalize that maybe even a little too much. Like I'm really thinking about what the players would like, and there's definitely some truth to what Armin is saying, that look, the players come with some responsibility here. If they want to have enjoyment, if they want to have fun at the game session, then they have to be willing to engage and do that themselves. And it's not, I think that's one of the advantages that I have perhaps with gaming on a weekly basis with people over a long period of time, getting to know each other. We're already friends in more or less in real life. We're certainly acquaintances. We respect one another. So we're not there to waste each other's time. Everyone is there to have a good time, and no one's there just to be to sabotage. So yeah. And so it's true. Yeah, you're responsible for whatever you want out of the hobby. That is what you're responsible for yourself. Yeah.
And of course, like people like Shauner, like we know, like he's you got like an issue with fun with the term fun.
Well, yeah. Whenever I think I understand where Shauner's coming from, because I think the idea is that if you're just looking for goofiness, that's kind of the superficial level, and that's okay. I've run goofy sessions before, but it's not. When I think of my favorite sessions, and if you think back, like I had asked Max at the beginning, if you think back over the last year, do you have a favorite session? Do you have a session that said that was awesome? And then ask yourself, well, why was it awesome? For my personal answer was never that. It was when this guy had a fart joke and this other guy did this, and it was wacky and kind of clown shoes, and that could be funny, but I'm more. When I gauge it based on how much feedback I get from players too, where players are texting me the next day saying, that was an unbelievable session. I can't believe it. That was the best one we've had yet. It's never just because it was fun. Yes, it was fun, but there was other elements that in addition to that. And I think that's what, if I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I think that's what Shauner's getting at. It's not just the fun. There's something else that enhances it. It's not a superficial enjoyment. It's more of more engaging, more something that you remember, you'll continue to remember, and and think about often. So
Yeah,
if
it's
he'll correct me if I got that wrong, but I think that's
oh,
where he's going with that.
I think that's also like how I understand it as well. But like, and yeah, it's like fun does not equate funny necessarily.
Yeah, no.
And there's a difference between like intrinsic fun, like something that you do because like doing the activity in itself is fun.
Yes,
And
yes.
extrinsic fun.
Yes,
where
I watched your video
the
on that.
fun
I think you're
becomes
absolutely right.
from a reward. Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
like I think it's important to have a table that is like correctly aligned on that are looking for the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
If you're
everything's
just
yeah.
if you're just there
It's
like to roll the
firing on all
dice,
cylinders. Everyone's kind of engaged and doing different things and unexpected things. And but I really liked how you described that in a one of your streams, where it was that concept of intrinsic versus extrinsic. And I think you're onto something there. That made a lot of sense to me. And again, this is someone who's doing this in their second language, so the rest, so like pretty impressive, Max. I have to say, pretty impressive.
but yeah, and like because like if like all this rolling the dice, oh, I got a nat 20, you jump up on your chair, and then you just like slay the dragon, whatever. Like, okay, that's good for some people.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
well. But
yeah.
sometime during a session, I'm just gonna be like in the dump, because like it's like, man, like no, I'm stressed. I'm go through all kind of like fucking emotion. I get angry. I get sad.
Exactly.
Then the session ends. We wrap it up. I come back to myself instead of being my character, and then it's just like, man, that was fucking great. I fucking lived. So I lived something.
Yeah, like we had it. Like one of the sessions that we had recently that I did get a lot of feedback from longtime players saying this was just absolutely an amazing session. It was amazing in part because his character experienced significant loss, like a real loss, and he played it like a real loss. And then afterwards, he's like, "That was so much fun." But in the moment, he was like despondent. His character was despondent. He was devastated that his mentor is there laying dead on the floor, and he's like, for that was this real poignant scene in this game. And yet afterwards, we were talking about it. He's like, "That was so much fun." I'm like, well, yeah, but like we all felt like this deep emotion. But it was still fun. And afterwards, we could talk about it. It was fun. We laughed about it too afterwards. But in the moment, that was not the tone. The tone was like a significant loss, and it's a devastation. The character felt devastated, and in fact, so devastated that player, of his own accord, decided to retire the character. Like it just completely changed the character's worldview.
I love that.
And I love that kind of thing. That's just awesome. And I think that should be encouraged, that when players are that into their character, that they're willing to say that this character is out of the out of the active adventuring mindset because of this. Oh, we got another comment here.
Justin is right there. Like all those things are part of fun and role-playing game.
Yes, exactly. I agree. I agree. Like all of those.
I think as a player, you need to allow you don't we all like. Hopefully we're all there, like, or like if at the table, we're all there for the same kind of a goal. And if this is part of the goal we're trying to get, like this immersion in the character and stuff like that, don't be ashamed of it. Like let yourself go. Like,
let it go. Absolutely.
Allow yourself to feel something. I think that's when we, maybe especially as men, we get like this stoic, and I think it's good in real life. We don't want to be like emotional wreck all the time, but when we go to role-playing game, connecting with this emotion of somebody else.
Could you highlight Arnman's comment? Because I just want to make a comment on this, and I think it's good. Fun is amusing, entertaining, or enjoyable by definition. Fun is why we do anything in hobby. Correct. It is more sophisticated than joking or pranks or such. Absolutely. Tension, fright, excitement, and fight, all fun. I think using that commentary, I don't think you'll find any disagreement here with Max and I. I completely agree with that.
I completely agree, and I often say, like, role-playing game, like we're not getting paid to do it and stuff like that. Like, we know that doesn't bring food on the table. It doesn't like it doesn't give like shelter. There's no ulterior purpose for role-playing game. So why do we engage in those? Well,
and I guess the my other comment on that, because I agree with that definition. Yeah, the tension, the fright, the excitement, that's all part of the fight of it, the conflict, that's all part of the fun. I guess what I'm going at with this, and why I'm trying to reconcile the what I understand Shauner to be saying and what I understand you to be saying, I would say, well, I'm looking for a more than just the superficial. I'm looking for that, what you described, that tension, the fright, the excitement. And I think that those things, tension, fright, excitement, I think that comes from more than a superficial, relatively, what we'll call it, maybe a pedestrian approach to it, where it's just, I guess what dice do I roll here? What am I doing? Okay, what can I do? Hey, game or dungeon master, what do I do next? That I'm looking for what Max and I are describing about what you allude to with this. It is more sophisticated than just joking and pranks. I think that this seems to be a recurring topic in our little sphere of the internet, the fun side of things. Yeah.
Or than just like because also that's the thing too. Like role-playing game, it's you're not there to be told a story either.
No,
it's much more involved.
It's more involved.
A movie.
Yeah.
You need to involve yourself
when it's done right.
The most out of it.
Yeah. When it's done right, it is way more involved. When it's done poorly, then it's I think it even has some downsides to your traditional board game or whatever it is. Like when it's done poorly, it's just a very complex and at times boring. It's like becomes math finder, those kind of things.
That's something Shauner say often, like you're playing a video game by hand.
Yeah, you don't want that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, if that's what you want, okay. But that's not what I'm looking for in this journey that I've taken. It's like, no, I want to first identify what it is that I enjoy so much, and then I want to do more of that, and I want to change practices that I've done for years. Perhaps I want to question all of those to see whether or not they're actually enhancing the experience or they're detracting from it.
There you go.
The stream is fun. Oh, thank you, St. James.
Thank you, St. James.
You're very kind. You're very, very kind.
And he say if it isn't fun to lose, then either the game mechanic sucks or the player is a baby.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. It should be character death is awesome. In most cases, it's awesome, and it can be a very fun part of and a very memorable part of a game session. It should be, hopefully. And sometimes it's completely random, and we've had that too, and that can be fun too. Oh, look at that! I just got killed. Okay, guess we're done. But yeah, I agree.
And if you like, you say, "Oh, and the other player's a baby," and that maybe that's a bit inflammatory way to put it, but that come back to what we're talking about, like people like earlier, like people like trying to win at D&D.
Yeah.
Winning at D&D. It's not about. For me, winning at D&D is getting into this level of immersion.
Yes, it is. I agree.
It's not about like defeating the almost like I would say like the simulation in a way, but like you get a world believable, but also like simulation of the character.
Yes.
You didn't make your character like a person. You brought him to life. I think that's what a big thing we're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that character genesis over time, that making something believable where you can instinctively know how that character would react. That's something you've created. You create, and I like doing that with my NPCs that I create, the characters I have. That's really something that is unique to this hobby, where it's not just a game piece that you're moving on a board. No, it's much more than that. And that's something I think is a topic I'm sure that you and Tyler will talk about in your excellent streams as well. That, hey, it's more than just, I'm not just moving, the top hat or the race car around the Monopoly board. I'm doing something much more than that. These are going to be these characters are going to be things that are going to live on in my imagination, hopefully forever. I always think back to that character. Those, I'm sure everyone in chat can think right now of a favorite character. Well, why was he a favorite character? Why was she?
They also, not only they live on your imagination for the rest of your life, but it's also you can learn something from those characters as well. Like
you can. Yeah, you can.
Like people say, oh, like, and it's not like said it's therapy, but it's like, you get to experience something in the shoes of somebody else. And
well, I think that's just good. That's just a good exercise. It shows a degree of emotional maturity that you can separate how you feel about something to how your character feels about that thing, and that they're okay. You can hold both in your mind.
Yeah, I think that's what it said. As Max said, the players are co-creators, so winning at TTRPG might be winning the roles, but success is character development.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, success, character development. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I do. I think that's a great way to put it.
Character development. It's not always character advancement. It's not always positive. It's like your character lived through stuff and become something. And I titled the stream like getting more from the hobby, and I think that's the crux of what we're talking about here. Like TTRPG, role-playing game. So I cannot say that word anymore without laughing. Role-playing game.
It's the ultimate dog whistle. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they can do something that, in my opinion, no other hobby can do. So when we talk about getting more from the hobby, like, don't just play them like video game by hand. Don't just play them like board game. If you want to do that, that's fine. But like,
it's okay.
Maybe you would be better just playing a board game or just playing a video game. Like
you might be, and it's I think that St. James he touches on something that was one of the key realizations that I had, is that when I looked back and see, why is it that I'm still doing this after so many years? Like, why is it that I keep coming back to this? And I think that was one of the key elements. It's the game changes. So there's been over the last few years, there's been the change in some of the board games that have been released, where they where they have these legacy games, and the legacy games are actually quite popular. So you'll have a board game, that each time you play it will change forever how it's played the next time, and so you'll see that it's kind of this movement towards legacy games, and people that like board games, really, not everybody obviously, but they're a popular version. And that's one of the things I like so much about the role-playing game hobby, is that those characters develop. They're never the same. They're not the same as where they started. They're different. That was a key element that I really like, and that has prompted a lot of the changes that I've been trying.
Yeah. And another one I would say also, like, not do is just play role-playing game like they're improv theater. Just trying to get the spotlight, trying to get the laugh and stuff like that.
I'm not good at funny voices and stuff like that. I find that actually quite distracting. I don't like that element. To me, it just seems a little silly. I'm not one that's going to put on a costume, and I'm not a LARPer. My players definitely aren't. Several of my players are really kind of blue collar guys. Like they're not into that. Yeah. But they are into immersion. They are, like, as we've been exploring these experiments that we've been running, they have been the ones that have been, this is absolutely the way we're going to go. We're not going back to the hand playing a video game by hand. We're going to focus more on the characters. We're going to be more, we're going to talk in character. We're going to do all these things. They don't do accents. They don't do funny voices. They don't do improv theater stuff. It's just not. It's not something they're interested in, nor is it something that I'm interested in. Yeah. And I think unless you're actually very good at an accent, just don't. And even if you are really good at it, in most cases, it's just not necessary.
And also, there's other way you can distinguish a character, without doing an accent, without doing funny voice and stuff like that. It's gonna be much more interesting if you distinguish him by the maybe the level of language, maybe the mannerism that he got, maybe there's other way you can give life to the character.
Yes.
That tell us more than just you got this Scottish accent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly.
It's a lot about I see a lot of people try to distinguish, and that goes back to why I like Pendragon so much, because I see a lot of people trying to distinguish their character by the superficial, like the appearance of the character, or like the class, or I'm gonna have this weird race class combo that is atypical, and people do it so much that nothing is atypical anymore. But and I would say, like, no, try to focus on the substance of your character. Like, try to go a level deeper.
Yeah, it's going to be way more substantive, and I don't really. It's just such a superficial thing to focus on. Well, he talks like this, or I mean, there's more to it. I want more over time, and this is something that develops over time, as others have said correctly in my view in the chat. It's not the character will develop over time, but it'll develop in different dimensions more than just he speaks with a lisp, right? Like, it's going to be more than that. And
oftentimes, like, those things become like kind of like a succedaneous of actual character trait.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Like, we in the game, like, we referenced it a few times because we're both in chat with a lot of people that are in chat here on the Shauner's channel, the game we were watching yesterday. You would see that, like, this one character that's like spend a lot of time arguing about what her character had, like the equipment,
that's not
the clothes, and then, like, when they start finally playing, the first, like, she go get an haircut, and then, like, a lot of discussion about the style and the stuff like that, and it's like, well, this doesn't really matter,
we're not when we talk about conflicts, and I do think there's a lot of value to focusing in on actual conflict rather than just the dailiness of living. Like, I'm not interested in the dailiness of living. Like, what did you put on your bran flakes in the morning? I don't care. I want to know what happens when the bomb goes off in the office building where you're working. Like, that's where I want to be focused on that, not what you took in your coffee on the way to work. Who cares?
If you role play those kind of scene where like, you're just like getting up in the morning, you're having breakfast, something is about to happen in that scene.
That's right.
The daily life is about to get like disrupted in a way.
Something comes over the television. There's a breaking news story. There's something, or there's a knock on the door, or something has to, like, so. Yeah, I don't like that. Like we were watching before, and it just seemed like a lot of arguing with the game master. I think they call them referees in Traveler, but it was just arguing back and forth with the referee over, well, can't I have this, and why don't I have this? And then he was talking about this. Well, in this world, it's like this, and it's not like that. And it just didn't seem like there was anything that would be memorable other than just arguing about the mundane. Like, who cares about it? Please, something happen. And I think it's great. Like, I do applaud. I don't know if he'll see this or not, but Big Bad RPG, when he plays a game, he instigates. He does stuff. I don't know if she's still in the chat, probably not, but RPG Grandma, when she's in character, she's doing something. She's always doing something. And I think that's the kind of, if you have one or two of those in your group, you're set. Because all you need really is someone to get the ball rolling. And that's,
and then you follow it as a GM.
And then I can take that impetus for action that the player is doing, and then we can run with it, and then get the ball rolling. It is absolutely
that's the advantage. That's the advantage also if you don't come at a table with an idea of a story you want to tell, because now one player at the table like push the ball in one direction. All right, let's just go see. Let's see where it goes.
Let's see where it goes. Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to bring it back. Actually, like, let's focus on what I had planned.
Exactly. So
the player is interested in doing this thing. The groups want to follow them as well.
And as players, I think players, they owe it to themselves and to the rest of the group to be looking for things like that to happen. Like, how am I going to instigate something here?
Yeah.
Like, it's the criticism is, how long does it take your game group to deal with a locked door? Like, it should not take you half an hour in real time to deal with an obstacle like that. You should have, like, looking for, well, what are we going to do with this? I'm not going to just sit around here. We got to do something. So I like that. I like that kind of momentum in a group, and it does come from those excellent players like Big Bad RPG. What I see him doing, where he's just I do this, I just go right, like excellent, and he does a great job at that.
Doing stuff like I was saying earlier, it's not always like doesn't necessarily like to be action oriented, like because something like there's investigation, there's like relationship building and stuff like that. Those also count for something, but
of course it does.
Meaningful. They need to be meaningful. Like you don't do like necessarily small talk. Like, oh, a nice weather.
No. It's not just talking about the weather. Like it's got to be something. It is better when it's something meaningful.
Yeah.
Instead of just shooting the breeze, right? Like it's
and sometimes you can cut to the chase as well. Also, like if
that's true. That's true. That's true. And that can sometimes be something that me as the game master I can encourage through my characters. But again, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm leading players by the nose. Nope. Like it shouldn't be like pulling teeth to get action happening. The action should be just on the cusp of breaking out all the time.
Yeah, and if you see the player like are interested in something, like maybe you didn't plan this thing to be important. Well, maybe it can be just gain some importance.
That's right. That's right. And maybe that can speak a little bit to effective prep. Effective prep is stuff that you can, if on a moment's notice, you can draw from that. It's really hard to draw water from a dry well. So I do think that it's important to put some water in the well, like get some prep there, so that if the unexpected happens, like you and I do something, I think we share this. I always go into a game session with a list of names. I just have a list of names. So if I need a name, boom, I've got a name. I'm not thinking about it. I can just get it. It's there.
Yeah. I use it less and less nowadays, but I had like list of names forever.
Yeah.
So you just like get to learn it.
You get to learn it. That's true. So I like to do that. I like to come with a list of things that are happening in the world that may or may not come into, and then I like to create a new one each week. So this is what's happening in the world. In the new week, something different's happening in the world. And that may or may not come into play. I'm not going to try to shoehorn it in. It's either going to be something that makes sense, or I just throw it away and we come up with new ones next week. So
I think that's a good thing to have, like in your campaign design. Almost like you want to have some conflicts in the world, and at first make it conflicts that is like bigger than the player, that is kind of in the background, and the player might interact with it. And at first you're just going to be like in a tangential manner, but the more and more they go, the more and more they're going to be involved directly into it, and at some point they might outgrow it and then become into bigger conflict. But have something happen in your world, make your world a living place as well. I think that's a very good
yes absolutely. And I think that is a key concept for a game, and I think all role-playing games do this in some sense or another. From what I can tell, they're all looking to simulate the world in some way, right? They're all playing at the world, to borrow the title of the book on the history of D&D. It is a world simulation. Well, if we're going to simulate a world and have it be believable, then yes, that world has to be living. It can't be just on pause in between. I think that's one of the concepts that some of the niche groups in the hobby, and I'd consider myself kind of a niche hobbyist anyway, but some of the niche groups where they're very adamant that the world continues to happen in between game sessions. I think that is, in the sense that it is important that the world is believable because it is a believable simulation, then I think they're right in that sense. There may be some cases where they're taking it to an extreme, but I do think the concept is something I can agree with.
Yeah, I often say like the world don't just exist in 100 feet bubble, like around the player, around the party.
Yeah, there's bigger things happening.
He's talking about the Bro SR. Yeah.
Well, I was kind of alluding to. I don't know enough about them to level any criticism. It's just
that's one big thing that they say. Like this kind of always on, like the one-on-one time.
I agree with that. I mean, the world should always be going on. I'm not. I think that they do what they like with it. That's fine. I'm not prepared to go quite to the extreme that they go, as I understand it. But again, my understanding on this is so superficial, is that I can't really, I would be uncomfortable criticizing it because I don't think I understand it completely.
Yeah, I don't tend to go as far as like always on in between session, like one day.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
But
Yeah,
it makes sense for the kind of campaign that they have with a lot of player that are gonna show up to some session, don't show up with like those big group. You know, if you do a player with like a game with 30 players, and every week only some show up, then you kind of have to run it that way. So
I suppose, yeah. It wouldn't work in my situation because just because of the way the composition of my group, it just wouldn't quite work.
Exactly.
In practice,
it's not like if you just have a small group, you can just pose like that is always there every week together.
Right.
You can just pose the world between session. There's no.
What I've tried to do is at the beginning of each, because if we're running episodic, yeah, that's true. This is the internet. We always spout off about everything, even stuff we don't know. I'm trying not to do that. But what I was going to say is that because we were doing episodic type things where it's like a serial, so the characters stay the same but the adventures are a self-contained adventure each week, then there was implied downtime between each one. And so we could start off by saying, well, let's talk a little bit about what happened after the last episode to get us to where we are now. And I think that that is my attempt at one-to-one time, where I'm saying, okay, so there's time that's elapsed, but I'll usually say it's like a couple months or whatever. I won't say it's been exactly 7 days and how many minutes.
That's something I like. We're past 2 hours now. Like, I don't know if you still have time, but like,
sorry about this. I'm wasting your time, Max. And this is your
it's not a waste.
Easy day.
It's not a waste at all, man. It's not a waste at all. Like, I quite enjoy it actually. Quite enjoy the conversation. But like, that's the thing. I'd like to talk to you about campaign design as well a bit, like the way you do it, like that. But because I do like it to have like a lot of the downtime. You mentioned that now. Like when I play a lot of Pendragon, like I talk about it a lot, and there was somebody like joking, say like Pendragon is a 1 to 52 time, because because
because you do like generational play, don't you? Like it's
exactly generational play. You
that's super
play
cool.
Like some of the son and the grandson of the original character.
I think that sounds awesome.
And the way you do it, usually you're gonna have like one adventure a year. So you do an adventure, then there's a winter phase. You see what happened with the manor and stuff like that.
Makes sense.
The next session or the next adventure is the following year, so it allows you to pass a lot of time. But I like games with a lot of downtime. I like when healing take a long time.
That makes sense.
When travel takes a long time, stuff like that, because it also creates those situations where maybe like now there's something we need to do now, but I'm injured. Do I want to wait and now the consequence can become bigger, or do I want to go in what I'm not 100%, and it create this sense of risk and this risk reward in a way, those decision taking. And I think like that's also like having choice, weighting your risk. It's a big part of role playing as well. It should be. Yes. And a lot of modern gaming kind of like wave it off by making it like too easy. Bringing like heal too fast. So. Yeah. And I think that's part of like that's what I wanted to talk to you about, like a campaign design as well, because like you said like you used to have episodic play, you change system often with your group. How do you see like but you don't do only one shot, so how do you see like this campaign design, like that can allow character development but that also can be resolved at some point?
So I've done a few campaigns that were very long duration. And those long duration campaigns, I started out with an idea of a big thing happening in the world. And then the campaign was the players gradually discovering that there's a common thread through the adventures that they went on a week-to-week basis. And then as they pull at that thread, I would, and depending on what it was, so like the big thing in the world was in a constant state of flux, because as they would come up with ideas, well, I think it's this that's kind of behind this, or I think there's, and then I'd say, wow, that's a good idea. So I'd make some notes on that. Like, oh, I will unabashedly steal players' good ideas. all the time. For long-term campaigns, absolutely. So if someone's like this, they'll hypothesize, I think this is this is the big bad, or I think this is an unanswered question here. Why is it that this happened? And I'll take that, and then I'll try to think, well, what would that be? Like, how is that can I incorporate that, or can I take that idea that the player had as part of my big campaign and adjust it such that it'll be novel and fresh when they do encounter that idea that they had actually seeded with me. So my idea of campaign design is not to have a plot laid out. Like this is one of the things I have a hard time with. I ran the entire Rise of the Rune Lord, which is a big adventure path for Pathfinder. And it was, we did the whole thing start to finish. And I have to say, at the end of it, I just felt like it just felt like I was just reading a story essentially, or they're just playing their choices in the end didn't make that much of a difference. So I would say that my idea of ideal campaign design is more just to start very small, maybe have an idea of what the big event that's coming is, but then be flexible enough to just draw out the characters' theories, the players' theories, and incorporate them with some adjustments into what's actually happening. And so it's much more, ideally, it's much more of an ongoing thing. Now that required, when I was doing that, the few times that I've done that, I think 3 times. In each time that I did that, it required a lot of notes on my part to keep track of what characters the players had interacted with, how they're related to other things, if they are. I tried to insert some, although not too many, red herrings, false starts. I don't want to use that too much, because I find that that can be very frustrating for players if they pursue something all the way through and it turns out that it was a completely wrong direction. I'd rather have that point to maybe something else, something else that can develop in the campaign, but it was a bit of a tangent to the overall, but might provide them with a bit of a bonus going forward, or additional information, intel that they can use. So that's my take on it. I don't like I tried initially to just do, introduction. I wrote it out like a thesis, right? So you go your introduction. In the introduction, you'd have your big bad, that's the thesis. And then you'd have the body of the adventure would be the various elements of that thesis. And then in the conclusion, you'd have the big confrontation, which ties everything up neatly. I'm not a writer. When I did that, I found very quickly that in order for it to be believable, I had to sacrifice a lot of my own ideas on that thesis and go with what the players were interested in. So that's how it's a long answer to like how I handle long campaigns. That's how I handle long campaigns. A big idea, and then that big idea adjusts over time depending on what the players are in, like their decisions, their theories, their interactions, and then that's eventually that comes to a head in a confrontation. And depending on how the momentum of the game is, that could be a confrontation that wraps up the campaign, or it could be just something that builds. So it's not the ultimate climax. It's just a little bit of a
jump off to something else.
It's a new jumping point, and then that reveals something else, and then this is a whole new level of intrigue or of hazard, or that's how I've done it. And so I tend to not run module based things. I would just pull modules for the individual adventures that made up so I don't really like modules for the ideas of adversaries, and I'll pull adversaries from modules because I think those are worthwhile. Sometimes localized conflicts, I'll pull that from a module, but I prefer to do homebrew campaigns because they can be much more organic.
Well, we were talking earlier about like the advantage of role-playing game versus other medium. And this is also like, you can see like the advantage of role-playing game versus like a novel. the fact that it's kind of real time, so you can adapt to what the player does, and you don't have to, like, if you read a novel and you try to figure out where the plot goes, but now, like, you can interact on the fly to the input of the player, like to what the
Yeah.
interest, their theory and stuff like that. You can listen to them, and I think learning to listen to your player is a big, and not only when
Oh,
they talk amongst
absolutely.
themselves, not only like when they address you, but I think your approach of campaign design, like, I think you're on the money on that. Like, I kind of do the same. You know, I want to have like an idea of what the world is,
Mhm.
and at first I'm gonna keep it like fairly mundane. I'm gonna introduce the fantastical elements, and the
Yep.
fantastical elements are gonna be fantastical. They're gonna be fantastical to the character as well. You know, they're
Mhm.
like, it's not something they're gonna see they have seen every day,
Mhm.
and and I start the world. There is some conflict in the world, and like
Yes.
I try to avoid thinking about the big conflict. I try to
Mhm.
stay like mid conflict, like a mid level, something that is reachable like a fairly soon. But that, yeah, then there can be like another jumping off point later on.
That's right. Yeah, there's just maybe it's just the tiniest of threads that take that small localized conflict, which is
Yeah,
where I think you always should start. I mean, it should always be really
you know,
close. Eh,
just like that, like, oh, you're in a
Yeah,
collapsing empire. You know, there you go.
yeah,
You got your conflict in your world. You can run from that. You know, like there's
yeah.
something happening. The character are in this world. The empire is collapsing.
We had
How
a
will this character react to that?
how will they react? I actually ran on this Jacobite Wiseman. One of my favorite campaigns that we ran, and it was multiple years, was an empire that had fallen. So like
Mhm.
the characters were all grappling with this new reality that their empire is gone. They've been
Yeah,
conquered. And what does that mean? And of course, I'm borrowing that from
real
Serenity,
life.
Firefly. Like, okay, so what happens if the real world? Yeah. So what, what
2023.
exactly? Yeah, exactly. Amen, brother. So the idea though is that, like, how would that be? Like, and that was a long standing campaign. It was really, really interesting. And it went for a long time. It was good. Yeah, that's watching the news. True. True. True.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, there's nothing wrong also like taking inspiration from the real world. Like I often do it from history. You can do it like, but like, don't,
yep.
again, like we said earlier, don't make it a lecture. Don't
Yeah.
try to
Don't
preach
moralize
to your
it.
player. Don't
Yeah.
moralize. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Uh,
Don't do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Present question
Mhm.
that you are as a GM interested in thinking about. You know, like you didn't like figure out the answer already. You're presenting the question, and you're gonna use the game in a way to explore the
We're
idea.
just going to explore it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Without any preconceived notion of what
Yeah.
I want the result to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
That's
that's,
exactly right.
that's the people oftentimes like, oh, the pillar of role playing game, like exploration, combat, and social interaction. But
Yes.
exploration can also be like an ideological one. You know, like
It can.
we're
Yep.
exploring this what if scenario, like
Yep.
this yeah, that there's
Yep.
always a question there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's a key. We talked a lot about imagination. Well, that's the essence, right? Asking what if.
Mm.
Well, what if this was like this? Or what if that was like? And we've had good success in running modern campaigns, like, so in a modern setting,
Mhm.
and just asking that what if. Well, what if this was going on behind the scenes, and what would that mean? So we've had some good success with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to talk today?
I really appreciate you having me on, Max. And I have to say, Max is, from my humble opinion, Max, you do the best job of asking good questions on when you're interviewing these game designers. I think it's just really interesting. I'm not one that's creating my own game, but I love listening. You'd interviewed a number of people, and
Yeah.
they're so yeah, I think it's really good. I'm excited to see that. You mentioned on Twitter that you're
Yeah.
planning on getting back into that. I think
Yeah.
that's
After my
excellent.
move, if I get like a more reliable
Yeah,
internet, I'd like to bring them back.
yeah,
Bring back those talk, because I really enjoy doing them, and I try to be useful to people that. Well, I try to be interesting to people that are not creating game, but I'm trying to be useful to people that want to create game or product and stuff like that.
yeah.
Uh,
I
that's
find
why
it
I
very
try to
interesting.
put a different line of question.
Yeah,
But
no, it's really good. And one of the things I think you're so good at is that when you ask a question, when you're interviewing someone, you get them talking more, and it's rare to find that. And I think that's really good. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to your audience. I don't know if any of them will watch this, but if they do, yeah, I hope that you found something interesting in my experience, and check it out. Maybe just question what you're doing and see if that's what you really enjoy. If you're spending a lot of time doing something that you don't like, then it makes sense to question it and maybe try something else, experiment, and see what it is.
I would say, like, both as a GM and both as a player, don't be afraid to get out of your zone of comfort.
Absolutely.
Maybe you have been doing for something like for a very long time, but say, maybe next campaign, let's try something a bit different. Because like
switch it up.
It's not like religion. You can like go try something else. It won't send you to hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
If you don't like it, you can always go back.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Max. It's exactly right. And I think that's I would just say, yeah, amen, hallelujah to that. I think that is absolutely the approach that I'm taking. And I think that for those that want more out of the hobby, maybe give that a shot. Give it a shot. I think it's worthwhile. Yeah. Whatever game you're looking for, but yeah, give it a shot.
All right. I wanted to thank you very much, Crispy, for your time.
Thank you.
It was a very
great.
interesting conversation. I had a lot of fun. I hope everybody's gonna go check Crispy's channel, because he's on an interesting, I like very humble guy, very authentic guy. He goes there, tries stuff, and then he tells you about it. And I think it's very inspiring. So thank you very much for what you do. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for everybody that watched live in chat. Thank you for everybody that are gonna watch on the replay. Like I said, check out Crispy's channel, subscribe and like, because that helps. I'm getting closer to 500 subs, which is
let's get Max at 500. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'll see you next time. Thank you all. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.